So hey there everyone, it's been a long time since I last recorded about the continuous version, the preceding version of this walkthrough episode. And so yeah, so we're in this video we're back again for the test number 2, reading passage 1, Tea and the Industrial Revolution. Before we're actually going through the text, we really want to know the types of questions. Of course, we have list of headings and we have some list of headings followed by true, false, not given, and I think that it's going to be fairly fast. So yeah, one thing you have to notice that sometimes when you're doing a reading passage, specifically in IELTS, is that we know that the list of headings, this was matching headings, which requires to understand the main idea. You have to know that a research article can be found the main idea can be found towards the end, whereas there are some persuasive essays that you can find at the beginning. Well, of course, the term essay, I mean specifically about the text passages, because when you see the heading you have, in our case it's Tea and the Industrial Revolution, and then we have a subheading, meaning a Cambridge professor says that so the word Cambridge professor says is that someone has actually read the article about Tea and Industrial Revolution. So yeah, the passage is going to be somewhat of argumentative or opinion based. So yeah, let's get started. Alan McFarlane, professor of anthropological science at King's College, Cambridge, has, like other historians, spent decades wrestling with the enigma of the Industrial Revolution. Why did this particular Big Bang, the world-changing birth of industry, happen in Britain? The Big Bang happened in Britain. And why did it strike at the end of the 18th century? So I have the advantage of doing that beforehand, and I can tell you that the time and place of the Industrial Revolution is the correct answer, number 4. So yeah, I've been failing to record the video for a very long time, and I think that I'm not going to be wasting your guys' time, and I'm going to pretty much explain. So the time and place. The time is 18th century, and the place is in Britain. However, if you check the research for the reasons for an increase in population, no, it's not talking about that. Industrial and the fear of employment, two things, and you have two things. It's not talking about that as well. Development in cities in Japan, it's not talking about that yet as well. The cases of Holland, France and China, changing in drinking habits, that's another one. Two keys to Britain's Industrial Revolution, conditions required for industrialization, comparisons with Japan led to the answers. So yeah, this is the things led to the answer. So yeah, paragraph A is is going to be number 4. We're going to take that, and of course we're going to highlight that as well. So let's go with the paragraph B. McFarlane compares the puzzle to a combination law. There are about 20 different factors, and all of them need to be present before the revolution can happen. For industries to take off, in order to start, there needs to be technology. And power to drive factories, a large urban population to provide cheap labor, easy transport to move goods around, an affluent middle class willing to buy mass-produced objects, and a market-driven economy and a political system that allows this to happen. These are all the factors. While this was the case for England, other nations such as Japan and the Netherlands and France also met some of these criteria but were not industrializing. All these factors must have been necessary but not sufficient to cause the revolution, says McFarlane. After all, Holland had everything except coal, while China also had many of these factors but still lacked some sufficient factors. Most historians are convinced that there are one or two missing factors that you need to open the lock. So yeah, so in this case, it's really talking about the factors, and the factors are conditions required for industrialization. In our case, they're saying in order for the industrialization to take off, to happen, to start, technology and power to drive factors is needed. Urban populations to provide cheap labor, easy transport to move goods around, and an affluent middle class willing to buy mass-produced objects, and a market-driven economy and a political system that allows this to happen. So yeah, that's probably it. So we have number 8 as the answer. So is that right? So we have 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, 7, 8. I'm gonna take that. I guess I'm forgetting the Roman numerals. Now, C. These the missing factors he proposes are to be found in almost every kitchen cupboard. Tea and beer. Tea and beer. Two of the nation's favorite drinks fueled the revolution. The antiseptic properties of tannin, the active ingredient in tea and hops of beer, plus the fact that both are boiled with water, allowed urban communities to flourish at close quarters without succumbing to waterborne diseases such as dysentery. Alright, I'm going to highlight that. The theory sounds eccentric, but once he starts to explain the detective word that didn't went into his deduction, the skepticism gives way to very admiration. McFarlane's case has been strengthened by support from notable quarters. Roy Porter, the distinguished medical historian, recently wrote a favorable appraisal of his research. So yeah, it's talking about the two key factors. So the two key factors in our case is it's obviously very well known. The tea and beer. They said tea and beer, two of the nation's favorite drinks, fueled the revolution. So paragraph C is going to be two keys into Britain's industrial revolution. So we're going to choose number 7. So yeah, there we go. I'm going to take that and highlight that. Two keys. Alright, so take that as well. And we want to take this one as well out of the list. There we go. Paragraph D. Macfarlane had wondered for a long time how the Industrial Revolution came about. So he's confused. Historians had alighted on one interesting factor around the mid 18th century that required explanation. Between about 1650s and 1740s, the population in Britain was static. So it was static. So Macfarlane would wonder for a long time how the Industrial Revolution came about. So he's asking, how did it happen? One interesting factor is that in the 18th century that required explanation. So this is not a main idea yet. So between about 1650s and 1740s, population in Britain was static, but then there was a burst in population growth. So there was a burst in population growth. Macfarlane says the infant mortality rate halved in space for 20 years, and this happened in both rural and cities. I mean, rural areas and cities, and across all classes, meaning poor, rich, middle. People suggested 4 possible causes. Was there a sudden change in the viruses and bacteria around? Unlikely. Was there a revolution in medical science? But this was a century before Lister's revolution. Was there a change in environmental conditions? There were improvements in agriculture that wiped out malaria. But these were small games. Sanitation did not become widespread until the 19th century. The only option left is food. The only option is left is food. So the food was the only case why the burst in population happened. But the height and weight statistics show a decline. So the food must have got worse. Efforts to explain the sudden reduction in child's death appeared to draw a blank, meaning not yet known. Like nobody knows this still. So development of cities in Japan, industrial the search for reasons for an increase in population. So do you think that the number 1 is the answer? So yeah, of course, the number 1 is totally number 1, burst in population, because then there's nothing else that is suitable for this answer not to be chosen. So yeah, there we go. We're left with paragraph D. I mean E, F, G. Yeah. This population burst seemed to happen at just the right time to provide labor for the Industrial Revolution. When you start moving towards an Industrial Revolution, it is economically efficient to have people living close together, says Macfarlane. But then you get a disease, particularly from human waste. Some digging around historical records reveal that there was a change in the incidence of waterborne disease at that time, especially dysentery. Okay, Macfarlane deduced he thought that whatever the British were drinking must have been important in regulating disease. He says, we drank beer for a long time. So we drank beer. So there we go. We have something that they're saying. They drank beer for a long time. The English were protected by the strong antibacterial agents and hops. Sorry for my voice. Which were added to help preserve the beer. But in the late 17th century, a tax was introduced on malt, which is the basic ingredient of beer. The pour turned to a water again in the 17th, 20th, and in the 1720, the mortality rate began to rise again. Then it suddenly dropped again. What caused this? This is so the passage is something like for a long time. Okay, this is a really good thing to think about. For a long time, for a long time, the English were protected by the strong antibacterial agent in hops, which were added to help preserve the beer. But in the late 17th century, a tax was introduced in malt, the basic ingredient of beer. So this means that the English changed their drinking habits, which changed the mortality rate as well. So yeah, I think that changes in drinking habits in Britain. So it's number 6. For us, we're gonna take that. All right, so I'm gonna highlight it as well. There we go. F. Macfarlane looked to Japan, so he started looking for the Japan comparisons, which was developing large cities about the same time, and also had no sanitation. Waterborne diseases had a much looser grip on the Japanese population than those in Britain. Could it be the prevalence of tea in their culture? Macfarlane then noted that the history of tea in Britain provided an extraordinary coincidence of dates. Tea was relatively expensive until Britain started a direct clipper trade with China in the early 17th century. By the 1740s, about the time that infant mortality was dipping, so drink was common. Macfarlane guessed that the fact that the water had to be boiled together with the stomach purifying properties of tea meant that the breast milk provided by mother was healthier than it had ever been. Okay, this is a really good thing to know. Just because they drank that beer and something like that, the mother's breast milk provided by mothers was healthier than it had ever been, is something very funny to read about. No other European nation sipped tea like the British, which, by Macfarlane's logic, pushed these other countries out of contention, or is like contention. I'm sorry for that. What a misery in reading that. So what is paragraph A about? So basically, Macfarlane compares Britain with Japan. While both countries were developing cities about the same time and also had no sanitation, waterborne diseases had a much looser grip on the Japanese population than those in Britain. So this is obviously a comparison. So there's just because the Macfarlane compared it with Japan, he got the answer. So I think the comparison with Japan led to answer. So yeah, let's choose that. There we go, and take that. Choose it over there, and we're left with paragraph G. But if tea is a factor in the combination log, why didn't Japan forge ahead in a tea-soaked industrial revolution of its own? Macfarlane notes that even though 17th century Japan had large cities with high literacy rates, a futures market, it had turned its back on the essence any work-based revolution by giving up labor-saving devices such as animals, afraid that they would put people out of work. So the nation that we would now think of as one of the most technologically advanced entered the 19th century having abandoned the wheel. Well, of course, development of cities. Is that it? But no, it's not. The industrialization and the fear of employment, that's the only correct option. Fear, be afraid, and unemployment means is out of work, so the second option is the correct option we have. So there we go, guys. And we're going to choose that. Yep. And remove number 2 as well. There we go. Now we're left with true false not given. China's transport system was not suitable for the industry in this 18th century. So basically China is mentioned in paragraph F here, so we know that tea was relatively expensive until Britain started the direct clipper trade with China. That's something that they're saying. There's nothing about transport system yet, but however there's also one more I saw above. China. While China also had many of these factors, but still there's nothing about no information about There was no information whether or not transportation was suitable or not. So yeah, tea and beer both helped to prevent dysentery in Britain. Of course, that was true. I can look at that. True, right? It was like true. That is the true. Yeah, true is the answer because where was it? So I read it somewhere. I definitely remember that it was somewhere. The antiseptic properties of tannin, the active ingredient in tea and in hops and beer, plus the fact that both are made with boiled water, allowed urban communities to flourish at once. So tea and beer both help to prevent dysentery in Britain, which is another word such as dysentery. Dysentery, that is it. So, which means true, of course. Prevent dysentery means like basically without succumbing to waterborne diseases such as dysentery. Roy Porter disagrees with Professor Mark Verlaine's findings. I don't think so. That is 100% false because yeah, I'm gonna explain that in a second. Because Roy Porter, the distinguished medical historian, recently wrote a favorable appraisal. So he appraised. He didn't disregard it. So McFarlane case has been strengthened by support for the notable scholar Roy Porter. That's another way. So there are two reasons. So yeah, that is false. After 1740s, there was a reduction in population in Britain. So 1740. What was the number? 1740s and 1740s. So we have between 1650s and 1740s. Whoops, where's that? Something happened. The population in Britain was static, and there was a reduction in population in Britain. Is it true? No, there was no reduction. There was an increase. There was a burst in population growth, so that's false again. So I'm gonna take that. People in Britain used to make beer at home. I remember that it was tannin, the key active ingredient, flourished at close quarters without succumbing to water brezine. The theory sounds eccentric, but once he's blah 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 blah. English were predictable. I knew that there was something about help to preserve the beer. But there's no information whether the British used to make beer at home. I don't necessarily think that is the answer. So yeah, I'm gonna take that as a not given. There we go. The tax on malting indirectly caused a rise in the death rate, and yeah, there was a introduction. Tax was introduced. Where is it? Tax on malt, and I know that. Where was it? All right, there we go. But in the 17th century, a tax was introduced on malt, a basic ingredient of beer. The poor turned to water again, and in the 17th century, the mortality rate began to rise again. So yeah, caused a rise in the death. So yeah, that's true. So there you go, guys. We finished passage 1 in test number 2. We have successfully finished test 1. I mean test 1 reading passage 1, the Industrial Revolution. Tea and the Industrial Revolution. Yeah. So yeah, guys. So if you have any questions about this particular video, please feel free to ask any questions. To leave a comment in the comment section below, and I'll be very happy. I'm gonna be extremely happy. I'm gonna be surprised. I'm gonna be shocked, to be honest. So that if you so once again, if you think that something is explained incoherently, and if you think that I can find a different approach and find a different alternative ways of explaining a particular question in your so that you understand it in 100%, please leave your questions in the comment section below. And yeah, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do subscribe, like it if you liked it, and of course dislike it if you don't like it. So yeah, thank you very much, guys, for watching. We'll come up with the next video on the next episode. So yeah, have a wonderful time.